The gravel crunched under the tires of my Ford F-150 as I pulled up to the boundary of my property. I had owned these 40 acres of black dirt bottomland for 20 years. It was quiet, productive, and most importantly mine. Or at least it was supposed to be. To the north of my property line sat the Willows, a newly developed high-end subdivision filled with white picket fences, manicured lawns, and people who seemed to think that a no trespassing sign was merely a suggestion for the lower classes. Leading the charge of this suburban invasion was Brenda Whitmore. Brenda was the president of the Willows Homeowners Association. She was a woman who wore crisp linen suits to garden and carried a clipboard like a scepter. And for the last 3 months, Brenda had decided that the quickest way to the organic market in town was directly across my soybean field. I stepped out of my truck, the humid morning air clinging to my skin. There, etched deep into the soft earth, were the unmistakable twin tracks of a luxury SUV. "Third time this week," I muttered, kicking a clod of dirt. I'd tried being neighborly. I'd gone to her house with a box of fresh, sweet corn. She looked at the corn like it was a pile of radioactive waste and told me my tractor was disturbingly loud during her yoga hours. When I asked her to stop driving her silver Mercedes across my field, she laughed. "Oh, Silas," she'd said, her voice like honey poured over gravel. "It's just dirt. Besides, that old dirt road of yours is a public easement. My lawyer says so." "It's a private farm lane, Brenda. You're compacting the soil and killing the crop." "We'll see about that," she'd replied, slamming her designer door. The local sheriff, a man named Miller who had gone to high school with me, just shrugged when I called him. "Silas, it's a civil matter until she hits something or hurts someone. Property lines are messy with those new developments. Just put up a fence." I had put up a fence. Brenda had driven right through the wooden posts, claiming she lost control of her vehicle on the unstable terrain. As I stood there looking at the ruined soy sprouts, something in me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap, but a quiet, cold realization. If Brenda wanted to treat my farm like a road, I was going to give her the kind of road a farm deserves. I spent the next 2 days in the seat of my backhoe. To any observer, I was simply performing routine maintenance. I was improving the drainage along the northern perimeter. The weather forecast was my best friend. A massive low-pressure system was sweeping in from the west, promising 4 inches of rain over the weekend. The soil here was heavy clay. When it got wet, it didn't just get muddy, it became a primordial soup, a thick, bottomless slurry that could swallow a boot, let alone a tire. I dug the trench right where the shortcut entered my property from the paved cul-de-sac of the Willows. I made it wide, about 6 feet and deep. Then I did something a bit more calculated. I didn't leave it as an open hole. I filled the bottom with loose, tilled peat and covered the top with a thin layer of dry topsoil and a scattering of hay. From a distance, it looked like a freshly graded patch of flat ground. To an experienced farmer, it looked like a trap. To a woman in a hurry to get to a brunch meeting, it looked like a green light. Saturday morning arrived with a vengeance. The sky was the color of a bruised plum and the rain came down in sheets. I sat on my back porch, a tin mug of black coffee in my hand, watching the gray curtain of water fall over the fields. Around 10:00 a.m., the familiar hum of a high-end German engine pierced through the sound of the rain. I stood up, leaning against the porch railing. Through my binoculars, I saw the silver Mercedes GL-Class turn off the pavement. Brenda didn't even slow down. She was confident. She had the off-road mode engaged, I'm sure. She probably thought she was an explorer conquering the wild frontier of the county line. She hit the edge of my field, her tires throwing up plumes of muddy water. She was doing at least 30 miles per hour. "Wait for it," I whispered. The Mercedes reached the improved drainage zone. For a split second, the car seemed to defy physics, gliding across the hay-covered surface. Then, the front end suddenly dipped. There was no loud crash. Instead, there was a sickening schloop sound, the sound of 3 tons of luxury engineering meeting 3 feet of liquid clay. The back wheels spun wildly, kicking up a rooster tail of black muck that coated the silver paint, the tinted windows, and the nearby fence posts. The car settled at a 30-degree angle, the front bumper completely submerged in the trench. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was still hot. I grabbed my yellow slicker and walked down the lane. By the time I got there, the driver's side window was powered down about an inch. "Silas," Brenda screamed over the rain. "Silas, get out here, my car, look at my car." I walked up to the edge of the trench, careful to stay on the firm grass. I looked down at the Mercedes. The mud was already up to the headlights. "Morning, Brenda," I said, raising my voice to be heard. "Nasty weather for a drive." "Don't you morning me, look what your hole did to my vehicle. I'm sinking. Get your tractor and pull me out this instant." I tilted my head, looking at the car with a clinical eye. "Gosh, Brenda, that's a real shame, but I'm not sure I can help you. You see, you're currently trespassing on a designated agricultural drainage project. If I use my tractor to pull you out, I might damage the integrity of the trench. My lawyer says I have to be very careful about liability on my own land." Brenda's face turned a shade of purple that matched the stormy sky. "Liability? You did this on purpose. I'll sue you for every acre you own. This car costs more than your entire house." "Maybe," I said calmly, "but right now it's a very expensive anchor and the rain isn't stopping. In about an hour that trench is going to fill with runoff. The water will probably get inside the cabin. Those electronics don't like moisture, do they?" She looked down at the floorboards. A thin trickle of muddy water was already beginning to seep through the door seals. Panic finally replaced her rage. "Please," she shouted, her voice cracking. "I have a meeting, I have leather seats, just pull me out, Silas, I'll pay you." "I don't want your money, Brenda, I want you to look at that sign." I pointed to the bright red and white "No Trespassing" sign she had driven past, the one I had reinforced with a steel pipe. I see it, I see it." "Read the bottom part," I commanded. "Violators will be prosecuted," she yelled. "No, the other part, the part I hand-painted this morning." She squinted through the rain. Under the official warning I had written in bold, black letters, "This is not a road, it is a farm, ACT accordingly." "I understand," she cried. "I won't drive here again, I promise, just get me out." "I'll tell you what," I said, leaning in. "I'm going to call a professional recovery service. They have the right equipment. I wouldn't want to accidentally rip your bumper off with my disturbingly loud tractor." "Call them then, hurry." "Oh, I will, but the nearest heavy-duty tow truck is in the next county over, and with these roads flooded it might take them a couple of hours. In the meantime, you're welcome to wait in your car, or you can walk back to the road. It's only about 50 yards. Brenda looked at her feet, then at the swirling mud outside her door. She was wearing cream-colored suede boots. "I can't walk in that." "Well," I said, turning to walk back to my house, "the coffee's hot at my place, but I don't think you're invited. I'll go make that call now." I didn't actually call the tow truck for 45 minutes. I spent that time finishing my coffee and watching the Mercedes settle another 3 inches into the mire. It was a beautiful sight, a monument to hubris being reclaimed by the earth. When the tow truck finally arrived, it was driven by a guy named Big Pete. Pete looked at the car, then at the trench, then at me. He gave me a slow, knowing wink. "That's a deep one, Silas," Pete said, suppressing a grin. "Gonna need the winch and the snatch blocks, might take a while, it's a delicate operation." "Take your time, Pete," I said, "safety first." It took Pete 3 hours to extract the Mercedes. By the time it was back on the pavement, the car was no longer silver. It was a uniform, crusty brown. The interior smelled like wet dog and swamp gas. Brenda, who had eventually decided to abandon ship and walk through the mud, was standing on the asphalt, shivering in a ruined linen suit, her suede boots left somewhere at the bottom of the trench. As the tow truck hooked up her car to haul it to the dealership, I walked over to the edge of the pavement. Brenda looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You think you won, don't you? You think you're so smart, you old dirt clod." I just smiled. "I don't think I won, Brenda. I just think you finally learned the difference between a lawn and a farm. A lawn is something you control. A farm is something that controls you if you don't respect it." She didn't say another word. She got into the cab of the tow truck and they drove away. The weeks that followed were the quietest I'd had in years. The HOA sent a few threatening letters about hazardous land conditions, but my lawyer, who happened to be my cousin and had a particular distaste for Brenda, sent back a detailed report on agricultural drainage requirements and the legal definition of trespassing. We never heard back. The trench stayed. I eventually filled it with gravel and turned it into a proper culvert, but I kept the mound of dirt on the side high enough that no low-clearance vehicle would ever dream of crossing it. I was out in the field late one evening, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and purple over the soy. The crop was recovering well. The tracks where Brenda had driven were still visible, but the new growth was starting to cover the scars. I heard a car pull up to the cul-de-sac. I tensed, wondering if she was back for round two, but it wasn't the Mercedes. It was a small, beat-up sedan, one of the teenagers from the neighborhood. He got out, looked at the no trespassing sign, looked at the culvert, and then looked at me. I raised a hand in a silent greeting. The kid nodded back, got into his car, and performed a very careful, very legal U-turn. I turned back to my land. The dirt was rich, the air was clear, and for the first time in a long time the boundary was clear. Some people need a fence to know where they don't belong. Others, like Brenda, need to feel the earth rise up and hold them fast. I hopped into my truck and drove back to the house, making sure to stay exactly on the path I had carved. It wasn't just a shortcut anymore, it was a reminder. As I pulled into my driveway, I looked at the title of the property deed framed in my hallway: Silas Thorne, sole owner. The HOA Karen might have had the money, the suits, and the fancy car, but I had the ground. And in the end, the ground always has the final say. I went inside, kicked off my muddy boots, and started a fresh pot of coffee. It was a good day to be a farmer.